Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this digital analytics program, DAP 201, or more affectionately known as the DAP Advanced Concepts Training. My name is Tim Loudon. I'm the program manager for the digital analytics program. I just couldn't fit DAP Advanced Concepts in one line, so I kept it on the slide as DAP 201. Anyways, thank you for joining us for this, this journey today. Theoretically, we'll be on this webinar from 1 to 4, talking about 1 to 4 Eastern, talking about all kinds of advanced concepts for the digital analytics program Google Analytics account, as well as other tools that integrate with Google Analytics accounts. I'm joined today by my colleague and buddy, Freddie Blicker, and the two of us will be your tour guides, so to speak, today. Before we get started, I do want to note a few things. One of the questions we always get asked is this being recorded and will it be posted? The answer to that is yes. We have a YouTube Analytics playlist on the DigitalGov YouTube account, and that's where we post all of our training. Although I always give the caveat, we also have analytics on our videos, and we know that people don't watch them all. So we encourage you to try to stay with us as much as you can today. I know that 3 hours is a long time. Also, we will be sending a survey afterward with the slides. Please fill out that satisfaction survey and let us know how we did today. We have changed up this training a little bit since the last time we did it over a year ago, so there's some new content, and we'd love to hear your feedback on it. We will have a break in the middle of this, about 90 minutes in. And then hopefully we'll finish either right on time or a little bit before 4. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the training. So the agenda for today, we will start off by tackling advanced custom reporting. Then we'll have a section on events, followed by making sure you're making the most of your on-site search data and how to find it based on your configuration. We'll have a little bit of a Q&A then, followed by a short break, 5, maybe 10 minutes, depending on how we're doing on time. We'll talk more about campaign URLs, which I feel hopefully everyone on this call is somewhat familiar with already. We will then go into advanced custom segments, optional script tag features, and new for this training, we're ending with 3 tools that integrate with Google Analytics, and we're just going to briefly touch on them to let you know what they do, and you may want to look into them further. We do have 1-hour-long webinars on 2 of the 3 tools already, and we're doing one next, actually in 2 weeks, on Search Console. So we will have spin-off 1-hour topical sections on each one of those. I do want to note that this is an advanced concepts training. It is not designed to be a beginner's course. We do have a beginner's course, the DAP Introduction, or what was formerly known as the DAP 101 course. That's on our playlist. If you're on this call right now, I hope that you have somewhat of a firm grasp of the basics of Google Analytics, because this is designed to be an intermediate course. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by talking about advanced custom reports. So custom reports are the reports that you make in the customization section, which is over here on the left-hand side in the bar under custom reports. They basically are all the reports that are not what we call the standard reports or the default reports or the canned reports, the ones that you see down here. So custom reports allow you to basically create a report where you can put the metrics and dimensions of your choice together rather than be forced to use the metrics and dimensions that Google decided were the ones that they thought you'd want to see. It's super, super powerful, especially in the context of the digital analytics program, because we have, excuse me, because we have so much data that using the filter option in custom reports is going to be something that's really, really valuable to you. So let's talk about how often you use them. Oh, one thing I forgot to note, also, while I'm speaking, Freddie will be in the chat function so that you can actually respond there with any questions you have, and he'll be monitoring. And when he's speaking, I'll be doing that. So feel free to put your questions or thoughts in the chat box at any time. With that, you don't have to put this in the chat box, but I did want to mention to kind of think about how often have you used custom reports before. If you're not a frequent user of them, I hope that you will become a frequent user of them because I think that they really expand your possibilities. So we're going to talk about the different types of custom reports: Explorer report, flat table report, and funnel. There's also one more that's called the map overlay, but it's basically only useful if you're looking for location, so we're not going to spend time on that today. We'll talk a little bit about regular expressions, and then we'll briefly touch on report tabs and metric groups. We have done a webinar on custom reports before, a 1-hour-long webinar. So if you want more after this particular course, you can go there and dive a little bit deeper. Okay, so the first report we want to talk about is the Explorer report. An Explorer report is the way that all of the default reports in Google Analytics are set up. So if you were looking at something maybe like an audience overview, or if you go under the behavior tab and you're looking at an all pages report, something like that, they're always set up in the Explorer fashion. What Explorer reports do are show you one dimension at a time with many metrics. So you have the ability to explore through the dimensions, but by default, you only see one at a time. And I think this will make more sense after you see me demonstrate it. So for this whole entire custom report section, for the different reports, we have put these little links in the slides for you so that you can add the templates. I've actually already added the template for the traffic sources report that we're about to go over, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about it here. So when you click this template, it will ask you to associate the template with a view. So you want to go into the Digital Analytics Program account, pick a property that may be responsive or that may respond to your agency. So some of you have agency properties or agency profiles that are in property 1, and some of you have agency profiles that are in property 2. So you'd want to just associate it with your agency profile. I've got it in a gov-wide profile right now just for the demonstration. So under customization, custom reports, we would click new report, and then this is the interface that you see. So we've got, you pick your type here: Explorer, flat table, map overlay, or funnel. Give it a title, and then you have a section where you pick metrics, and you have a section where you pick dimension drill downs. So as I noted, the reason it's called an Explorer report is because it will only show you one dimension in the report. The first one, in this case, is going to be source/medium. Then if I click into a specific source or medium, it was going to show me our secondary dimension, which in this case we've set to full referrer. And you can add more if you'd like. You could go in here and you could, say country after that or something like that if you wanted to. And then what you do is you drill down through each individual dimension. So in this case, we picked for metrics, sessions, bounce rate, and pages per session. And I'm just going to get rid of the country I put in there. It's going to show us the source medium, and then if we click into one, the full referrer. So this is going to be a way for you to better understand the traffic sources. I realized I can't spell here. There we go. Now, the big benefit of custom reporting is that you can add filters. We're going to do that in just a minute, but let's just start off by looking at this report without a filter. So if I hit save, I did my best to preload tabs for you today, so you won't all have to look at a loading bar for an hour of the 3 hours, but we'll see how it goes. So I've got my source medium. Now this is across all of participating DAP websites. So there's 5,000 websites in this data. The number one source medium is traffic, organic traffic coming from Google. Okay, we've got 34% of all sessions there. Now it tells me about bounce rate. Are those people more likely to leave or stay? Pages per session. So what's interesting here is that across all of the websites that participate in DAP, we can see if they come from Google, they average 2.63 pages per session. If they come directly, which is sometimes inflated, if you've heard me do trainings before talking about why direct traffic is sometimes inflated, they average 3.1 pages per session. Now, we set our secondary dimension, the one that would be shown to us after we drill down, as full referrer. So for organic traffic, there is really no full referrer. It's Google, google.com. For direct traffic, there's no referrer. But in this case, the number 3 referral is USPS.com. That's going to be because USPS is probably referring traffic to another postal service site that's not USPS.com. If we click onto it, it will show us the full referrer, meaning the entire URL of the page that's being clicked, of the page where it's sending people to another site. So from USPS.com, it's sending folks to another website. Now, in this view, being across all of government, it's not super helpful to look at this particular report. So I was saying before, one of the best benefits of the custom reports are that you can add filters. So let's say we wanted to have this report show us the traffic sources for a specific website. And we can pick any random one. I might say, let's see, I'm literally just going to pick a random one. But for a dimension, we would say host name. And then we have the ability to choose exact or regular expression. We're going to go over regular expression soon. Right now, we're just going to say exact, and I'm going to do justice.gov. OK, so now what I'm saying is, show me the report of the traffic sources that we created showing source medium first and full referrer second with these metrics, but limit it only to where the host name of the site was justice.gov. And I should make a caveat here. When you are all doing this, it's going to be more beneficial for you to do it in your individual agency profile, not the gov-wide profile, because we're more subject to sampling in a profile with more data. OK, so again, we see now the numbers are much smaller because we're referring only to justice.gov. So we've got referrals coming from Twitter, things coming from Facebook, Gov Delivery, so they must use Gov Delivery as an email service, FBI.gov referring traffic, all kinds of interesting information here. Now, let's say we want to know exactly where the traffic comes from. So let's see if we can see the FBI.gov referral. OK, so there are a whole bunch of different pages from FBI.gov that actually refer, they must have links to justice.gov. Now, if we want to go even further and get into, well, now we know where the traffic came from to justice.gov, but what page on justice.gov did it actually link to? Then we can add, in this particular report, we can add a secondary dimension. And this is the one time you can do this in Explorer report. You can add one dimension. So you can have a total of 2. But by default, it only lets you choose 1 at a time. In any given table, we can add 1. And I might be able to say page. If I add a secondary dimension of page, full referrer is going to tell us the URL where the traffic came from, and page is going to tell us the URL where the traffic landed on. So from FBI.gov/investigate white collar crime, it led to justice.gov, this identity theft and identity fraud page, 460 times in the last month. So this is how we use an Explorer report. We're drilling down. We know right now that we drilled down from the FBI.gov source medium. So all of this traffic is coming from FBI.gov to justice.gov. And we're using an advanced concept secondary dimension to be able to show you exactly where the traffic landed. This particular report we've given you the template for is going to be super valuable for anyone. You'll all need to actually add the filter for your specific site in, like I did with justice.gov. But once you do that, you're going to have a very succinct view at how traffic is coming to your specific site, rather than all of the sites in your particular agency's profile. OK, now that's the basics of an Explorer report. You can add a secondary dimension. You get your 1 dimension at a time. If we want to get a little more advanced, we can talk about using regular expressions in our filters. So regular expressions they're complex to kind of figure out in the beginning, but they're really useful. And what regular expressions do are allow you to search for patterns in a set of data and return things that match that pattern. So regular expressions use a special character language to be able to denote certain patterns in a string of either letters or numbers. So you can see here, I know it's kind of small probably on the screen, but there's the caret means start of a string. The money symbol means end of a string. There's all these different ways that you can use it, and anybody can you can just Google regular expression cheat sheet, and it'll give you all of these things. We're not going to go over all of the different aspects of regular expressions right now, but I will tell you that we've already done a webinar on regular expressions, and you'll get the link to that. I remember doing this very vividly. We went very in depth into some of the most popular characters and how you can use them. If you're interested in regular expressions, you should definitely check that out. But also, the best regular expression trick in the book doesn't really require any knowledge of regular expressions. What it actually is basically you can just put any word or string into the search field without any special characters. And it's going to search for any string that matches that and then return data. So to give a more succinct example, we've got an actual use case. Brian from OMB told us the last time we did this particular webinar, on a quarterly basis, I need to look at the number of page views on each of 24 different agencies /data pages. So the examples are USDA.gov/data, NASA.gov/data, and so on. Without the DAP aggregated account, this would be really difficult to do. You'd have to basically have a point of contact at every one of those 24 agencies and chase them for reports. But in this case, we can use regular expressions and use it in the government-wide profile to be able to see all of the data for any page that includes /data. So how can we do that? I think I've got it here. Right, OK. So I'm going to show you how I used an Explorer report with regular expressions to set this up. First of all, I just chose some metrics: page views, average time on page, and bounce rate. We want to start out with the dimension of host name to see the website that we're looking at. And then I added a page so that we can make sure we're looking at the /data page. Now down here, I'm using a filter where page contains the regular expression. And we've got right here, I've used some regular expression language. A dot means a wildcard. This is the escape symbol. So we're basically saying something ends in .gov/data. Now, when we say that, you'll see the result that we get. The page contains .gov/data. OK, our first dimension that we were looking at is hostname. So great, we've got all these host names. They apparently include /data pages. If I click on census.gov, it's going to drill down and open up the specific pages for census.gov. So you can see here that we have all these various different pages that include /data. Here's the one that I think would be, for the use case, most likely looking at. But then it's also got /data tools, data viz, all these various different things. Now, if we only were interested in seeing the /data, we could set the regular expression to say /data.html, and that's it. We would do that by adding in a money symbol for saying it ends in /data.html. But what this allows me to do is search across all of the participating DAP websites. You can see that these would all be contained in different agency profiles if I was looking at them individually. But because we have the aggregated view and we can use regular expressions, you can use that to say, I want to see this across many different websites. So use cases for you all might be not necessarily across many websites, but maybe just across your own website. If you have, for example, I know the folks at State Department, they have a whole team that works very specifically in consular affairs on passport stuff. And so they might have state.gov/passports. Well, maybe they're only interested in creating a report that shows them any page that contains /passports. What you could do in that case would actually be to go down here and say include in the State Department profile. I would first start with include hostname exact matches state.gov, but then I would say include page regular expression, and you could put in /passports. Then it would say the filter is going to say only data from state.gov and only data from where a page contains a specific subdirectory, in this case /passports. I hope that makes sense. I encourage you all to go to the regular expression webinar if it still doesn't make sense. I think that we were able to break it down and talk about some of the specific characters there. But using regular expressions is going to drastically improve your ability to search across the data set. All right. Moving on, we have one more Explorer report, and this one is to do landing page analysis. So how effective are your landing pages? We're going to use the metrics sessions, entrances over page views, bounce rate, and average time on page, with a dimension of page and then source medium. And I think I have this one here. So if I choose edit, I can show you how it's set up. And as you can see, we've got all the metrics and dimensions that were mentioned there. Sessions, entrances over page views, bounce rate, time on page. We have not added a filter yet, but we can go ahead and do that. In this case, I opened this very specifically in the Department of Education profile. So let's actually just take a look across the whole profile before adding a filter. Okay, so now across all of the Department of Education websites, the #1 landing page is studentloans.gov/mydirectloan. And we can see it accounts for 3.1 million sessions in the last month have started on this specific page. Now, again, we did an Explorer. We can drill down. We could go to the next dimension that we included, and it will expand from this row to show us the source of all the traffic to that specific page. So a lot of it was direct, meaning probably people have it bookmarked. A lot of it was from Google. And then this makes sense. You've got some loan servicers, Navient, organic from Bing, and so on and so on. Migrate Lakes is another loan servicer, and so on and so on. So this makes a lot of sense. But this is also really cool to look at in the sense that you can see how effective a specific landing page is. This is something where we'd also want to look at bounce rate. So for example, when people land on this page, meaning it's the first page of a session, their bounce rate in this case would be important. And you can see this one has a 73% bounce rate. So this is something about unsubsidized and subsidized loans. You know that people are coming to that page, reading the information, and then leaving and not staying on the site. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but depending on the goals of your site, it may be something that you want to try to keep people on the site to take another task. This is a cool metric here, entrances over page views. It's showing you how many times in a percent form, what percentage of the time this page was the first page of a session instead of, or I guess as a numerator with a denominator of total page views. So 37% of the time, this particular studentloans.gov page was the first page visited. And you can see like this, this create a graph page on a different website, only 11% of the time was at the first page of a session. And so that's really interesting because it's got a lot of sessions as the first page, but it also has tons of other page views that were not the first page. So a lot of kids are going to the NCES Kids Create a Graph page. Okay, I better speed up so we stay on track here. Now, flat table report. In this case, we're going to show you site speed by browser. Let me get rid of some of these other reports. The difference between an Explorer report and a flat table report is that a flat table report shows you more than one dimension at a time. So this is really, really good for, especially for exports, or if you want to have ranking based on every unique combination of dimensions. So here we can see I've got, I'm going to do the edit screen here and show you this. We've got Browser and browser version. Now notice I click flat table and the dimensions and metrics flip. So now we're showing browser and browser version, and the metrics, page view, average page load time, and page load sample. So we're looking at site speed by browser. Now, these are two specific dimensions that we've included, and you'll see that it shows them both at the same time. If I were to create the same report in an Explorer report, I would only see as the first screen of the report Internet Explorer, Chrome, Safari, Edge, and so on. I'd then have to click through. Say I clicked on Chrome, it would then show me all the different browser versions of Chrome, but it would only rank them within Chrome's own competition of version. Whereas in this flat table report, every unique combination of a dimension is its own unique row, and it's ranked based on whatever you choose, whether you want to choose the page load time or the page views, whatever metric you pick. You can click on the column, and it will actually sort them for you in either ascending or descending order. So in this case, we can see in the DOJ profile here, we can see that across all of the DOJ sites, Internet Explorer version 11 actually has the highest amount of page views. And then we can see here the average page load time as well. Now, it looks like across all the sites, everything right now is looking pretty even, all in the mid to low twos, which is good. We could obviously add a filter here to look for a specific website in the DOJ profile. And one other thing that I wanted to note very specifically about this report is that when you use it, make sure you have a page load sample that is representative statistically of being significant. In some cases, we see page load samples when you really narrow it down to a page or a specific site, that the sample size of the amount of times they measured the load time is too low for you to actually be able to use it with confidence. Know that this particular one, I only had 2 dimensions on. We could add another dimension if we wanted. If we added the dimension region, which I don't think anyone would actually do, that corresponds to state in the United States or the region of any specific region of a country. But if we were to add that, you'll see that the rows are going to get very different looking, because now it's saying Internet Explorer on IE11 from DC, and it breaks down the page views. So again, every individual combination of dimension is going to have its own row. Great for exportation if you want to use a pivot table or make visualizations out of spreadsheets or something like that. You can click export and download it in any format that you'd like. Okay, finally, the funnel report. So a funnel report is beneficial when you have a defined user journey, meaning you know you want your users to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 up to 5 steps. When you do that, you're able to track if your users are staying within that funnel or how many of them are dropping off and where. So I've got an example here where you can see, and I'll show you how we set this up in just a minute, but you can see that this particular funnel has folks on USA.gov looking at a specific section on registering to vote. So they want to know how many people go from the home page to the voting section and then to the registration page and then register to vote. And you can go to vote.gov after that. Used to be vote.usa.gov. So in this, we can see that of the total amount of people that started on the home page, which was over 334,000, a very small percentage only made it to this next section. Now, in that case, we'd probably want to just get rid of this step altogether and say when people made it to the voting section, how many made it through? One thing that you may notice over here is that this section gets larger than the other two. That's because you see how there's this little line? You can set a funnel report to show you when people enter at that stage. So the top section here, this 76,000, is showing you how many folks came in at this stage, probably from a Google search, rather than follow through the entire funnel. I'll show you how you actually set this up. And again, this is all covered in our custom report webinar, but this is a super powerful report if you have defined user journeys. The first page, when landing page matches USA.gov, that's the home page. And then the second stage is when page matches USA.gov/voting. The third one is another voter registration page. The fourth one is /register to vote. And then this is a little bit of a tricky one. They wanted to know how many folks click on the vote.usa.gov link. So for this one, we had to say an outbound event that matches vote.usa.gov from the specific register to vote page. But by doing that, we're able to get an accurate count of how many folks went through that whole funnel. And we can see here that you can set things like making the funnel open, saying if you want to measure it by user or session, and saying that a stage has to either follow immediately after a previous stage or it can happen at any time. And that's where we've got open here, so entering the funnel at any stage. That's where we saw that large group come in at stage 4. So that's a funnel report. I've seen it used for if you have like a form or some sort of application process that contains many pages. It's really great for you to understand where your users are dropping off and what percentage make it through the entire the funnel that you set, the journey path. Okay, right on time, 1:35. At this point, we're going to move on to event tracking, and I'm going to pass it off to Freddie to talk about this.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Hey, folks. So let's talk a little bit about events. Okay, so what is an event? Well, an event is simply a user interaction with content. So an event happens after your page has already loaded and the Google Analytics JavaScript has already loaded. So these types of interactions could be link clicks. So let's say, for example, you have an email address in your HTML content. Somebody clicks on that. That would be considered a great opportunity to track an event. Within DAP, all of these things are automatically tracked. So you've got email address clicks, different pop-up windows, form submit buttons, etc. Another example of a type of event are file downloads. So by file downloads, I'm specifically referring to PDFs or Microsoft Word documents, Excel files, those types of things that you can click on a link and then you'd actually download a file. Another type of event that you could potentially encode for are video plays. So let's say you have an embedded YouTube video within your content. You could actually encode an event around clicking on the play button and understand engagement with different videos on your site. Another type of interaction that you could potentially track within an event are Flash elements, although this is not that common. Flash is very quickly dying off, but it is, in theory, possible to track Flash elements. And then finally, AJAX embedded elements. You can implement event tracking to understand engagement with these types of AJAX embedded elements. I should mention that we've also already done another webinar on event tracking. We're including the link in this deck, and you will get a copy of this deck so that you can go back and refer to this and review that webinar as well. So moving on to the next slide, let's talk about what DAP automatically tracks for you in terms of events. So we provide you out of the box with file downloads. We track 35 different types of downloads. PDFs, Excel files, Microsoft Word, and the list goes on. You can find out the 35 different types by reviewing our documentation. If you don't know where to find that documentation, please feel free to contact us at dap@support.digitalgov.gov. Out of the box, DAP automatically tracks outbound links. So these are going to be links that you have in your content that link out to external sites. So for example, if you work at the FDA and you have a link pointing to the GSA, that link will automatically be tracked in DAP. Another thing that we provide you through DAP is tracking of events with outbound file downloads. So let's say you link to a file on another domain. If if a user clicks on that link, we also track those types of downloads. Also out of the box, we track all email address clicks, assuming you have hyperlinked those. One thing to note, really important caveat here. The actual file name of a download must appear in the URL. Now, let me explain why this is important. Now, the best practice is to typically link within your content directly to a file, so that when you click on that file, your browser renders and loads that file, and you see the actual PDF extension appear in your browser bar. Now, there are some websites out there that actually use pop-up windows that pop up an iframe or some type of window that contains the PDF, but does not render the actual URL of the PDF file itself. So it does not have the .pdf extension showing up in the URL there. Those cannot be tracked. So if you don't have a file name in the URL, it will not be tracked as an event. If you follow best practices and do include the file name, so for example, .pdf in the URL, then it will be tracked. So that's the important caveat to remember here. We do get some folks who do have questions around why they can't see anything, any data for any of their events. And oftentimes it's because of how their developers have encoded their website to render PDFs or other types of files within a pop-up window, which is not best practice. So that's the one limitation of event tracking. So let's move on to the next slide to talk a little bit about where to implement events. So you're typically going to have a page that loads. The DAP Google Analytics script loads as well. And you're going to have a page where there's a specific action that a user can take to interact with a piece of content, or perhaps even a form. Now, one thing to keep in the back of your mind, if you want to track some type of interaction on a specific page, it has to be relevant, right? That action must be relevant to your success metrics. So for example, the clicking of a form submit button would be a relevant success metric. You're trying to understand this high-level success metric and engagement for a specific form. You do not want to encode events for everything under the sun. It's not going to give you any meaningful data, and it's not going to help you understand user engagement with your site. Now, one thing to note here is any additional event tracking would need to be coded by your developer. So out of the box, DAP provides you with a lot of automated tracking for events. But if you have any specific additional types of events that you would like to track, please contact the DAP team before implementing to ask for our guidance and any type of technical support or questions that you may have. So that's really important. What you do not want to do is implement events across your whole site and then let us know, because we may run into some challenges there with the volume of requests and data that you're actually tracking. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about implementing these events. On the screen here, you will see two resources. We're including our GitHub, and we're including our DAP code capabilities summary and reference documents. Please review those if you have any questions on how to implement. We'll briefly go over how to actually do this. But again, this is more of a conversation to have with your developer and with the DAP team offline so that we can help advise you. So really quickly at a high level, in terms of how events work, you're going to want to implement custom event tracking using a function called GAS. So essentially, you're not going to be using any type of parameters. You're going to be encoding an event using a GAS function here. You can see the send event category action label value non-interaction values here. If again, want to caveat this, if you do want to encode your own events, please contact us first. This is not something that you should go off today and do. You need to actually plan scalably what is a meaningful interaction that you actually want to track. Okay. Now I realize this is a 201 level webcast, but I do want to just very quickly go over the concept of an event, how to categorize them, what it all means. So in terms of how we track events, we use different values called category, action, and label. So this is what gets pushed to Google Analytics when there is an event that occurs. Category is simply the name used to group objects that you want to track. Action is typically the type of event or interaction that you want to track. And label is typically a place where you can provide additional information for events that you want to track. Now let's look at an example. So let's say, for example, you have a form on your website. So for this specific form, let's say you want to track interactions with the submit button. So in this example here on this slide, we're specifically thinking about the State Department. So applying for a passport. So that's a form there. You go to that form, you fill it out, you click submit. With the on-click of that submit button, the values that you could pass would be category, form. So again, that's the 30,000-foot view. It's a really high level. The action would be submit, and then the label could be passport application. And so that way, you're able to capture meaningful data about an interaction, and you're able to decipher it to better understand the type of interaction that occurred, right? So these are going to be customized to specific types of interactions, and that's why they need to be meaningful and they need to be very specific. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about event reporting. So I'm sure many of you are already aware of the events section in standard reporting in DAP. I'm going to walk through a little bit and talk about how you actually use this report. So on my screen right now, you can see that I'm in the Veterans Affairs Agency profile. Events reporting is available in every agency profile. You can see here, I'm looking at the same screen that I had in my deck, and you can see here, top events, event category, action, and label. Now remember the example we just went over with the State Department, passport application, form submit. By virtue of how you've encoded category, action, and label, this will determine how you pull reporting for these events. Now, typically, I like to use the top events report. So you'll see here, again, on your primary dimension, it gives you the ability to toggle between event category, event action, and event label. So as you can see here, this is all data from outbound link clicks, downloads, outbound downloads, telephone clicks, mail to. There's a whole lot of data here. This is where you go, the top events report. This is where you go to understand engagement with events. Now, let's use an example here. I'm going to go to download. I'm going to go into PDF. And then I'm going to look at label. Now, label for PDFs captures, through DAP, the actual URL structure of where the file is located. You can see here this eauth.va.gov, and all these other characters within the URL string includes a benefit verification letter from May 21st, 2018. So that's the full file name right there. Now, here's a really cool thing that you can do. You can go to secondary dimension. You can type in page. And you can immediately gain insight into where these letters and these different files are linked to. So on this page, eauth.va.gov, with a subdirectory of download letters, this is where this file, this PDF file, is being linked to. So now using this combination of event label and page, you can start to see and understand and better think about how you slice and dice your data to gain insight into not only the actual PDFs being downloaded, but also where the actual PDFs are being downloaded from, right? So as you can see here, the top 5 pages where these PDF letters are being downloaded from are from this download letters subdirectory. So this starts to get very powerful when you're trying to understand user engagement with your content and what sections of your site help influence downloads of various different file types. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle in terms of looking at page and event level to understand user engagement. Okay, moving on. Let's look at a more complex example. Now, I was just showing you standard reporting. Now we're going to talk about custom reporting. So now in this example, we're going to use the VA again. It's the Office of Information Technology. And the question that we got, this is actually a question that we received through the DAP support line. The question was, how do we report on a specific section of the VA website? And in addition to that, how do we report on the number of downloads, right? So let's unpack that. We need to understand section of the website, right? So you could look at page, you could look at different areas of the website, and then also number of downloads. So how do we unpack that? How do we think about how to do this? Well, we have a custom report example here that you can reference and apply to your specific view in DAP. You're going to need to make some changes, but conceptually, this report will tell you that. So this is the report that we put together for the Office of IT Workforce Development. Okay, so you can see here, I'm in custom reports already. This is a custom report that we built. You can see that I'm leveraging the event category as the primary dimension. And you can see the primary metric is total events. Now you can see the out-of-the-box values that DAP automatically captures. And then you can see the total events, which represents total downloads, right? So let's edit this report and let's take a closer look at how I actually built this. So in this case, I chose to use an Explorer report. Now, since we're talking about events, we're going to use total events, which represents the total number of downloads in this particular case. If you were looking at total number of clicks to email addresses, total events would still represent the total number of clicks. So just to be clear about that. Now, in the dimension drill downs, I've gone ahead and selected event category, event action, and event label. So these are the usual values the usual dimensions that you would expect to see if you're trying to look at any type of event reporting. This is why it's so important that if you're going to do any type of custom event tracking, you need to have a consistent tagging strategy. Now, out of the box, DAP does most of this for you. So we're lucky in this case that we're able to anticipate what values will be passed through event category, event action, and event label. So now that I've defined the kind of context of the report through my dimension drill downs, let's look at how we use filters to get at these two questions. So we want to limit the report to a specific section of the va.gov website, and we want to include downloads. Okay, so the filters that we're using here is hostname, regex, and then oit.va.gov. This is limiting this to a specific section of the website. And additionally, we're looking at event action, and we're doing regex. And you see here all these different file types: CSV, TSV, XML, XLS, etc., PDF. And we're using regex. We're using a pipe symbol here which, as Tim mentioned earlier in the regex section, we're using a pipe symbol here to denote OR. So this is saying, show me CSV or TSV or XML and so on. Okay. So we click Save. And then we're presented with event category overlaid with total events. And you can start to drill into this custom report to see the different types of files. So we have 29,365 downloads. Within those downloads, you can start to see the breakdown of the different files. Now remember, event action in our filter, where we defined CSV or XML or PDF, you now start to see the file types that are available show up here, right? And you can start to see the number of downloads per file type. You can drill down further. Let's drill into PDF. You can drill down further into PDF and you can start to see the exact file location. So the exact directory where a file, a PDF file, lives. And then the corresponding total events, which represent downloads here. So we now have a report that shows how to report on a specific section of a website and how to report on the number of downloads. So that is how you leverage the power of category action and label tracking within an event to better understand user engagement on a specific part of a site overlaid with the number of downloads. So very powerful stuff, very quick and easy to go in there into custom reports and set up a scalable way to understand your downloads. Now, everyone will be getting this link so that you can play around with this and modify it to your site so that you will be able to understand and report on downloads by your specific section of a site. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Tim to speak about on-site search data.
All right. Thank you, Freddie. Okay, let's see. We're a couple minutes behind. I think I can make up the time here. Thank you for going over events in depth, Freddie. Now we're going to move on to talking about your on-site search data, which in some cases, agencies may not even see any data in the on-site search reporting section right now. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like and how you can make use of that data. So here's an open-ended question. Without looking it up, what do you think are your top 3 search terms? And I hope folks have access to the chat box. Oh, there we go. Okay, some folks have been responding. Let's see. What do you think your top 3 search terms are for your specific site? Can folks go ahead and put that in the chat box? Oh, people are being shy. Okay. Well, I'd like you all to try to think of what you think your top 3 search terms are, and then hopefully after this section to be able to check if that's true. So we're not talking in this section about organic search terms, meaning coming from Google or Bing. What we're talking about here are searches that are done from within your site, in your on-site search box. So there are lots of different configurations of the way search works across all the different sites that participate in DAP. Our friends and colleagues over at GSA at search.gov, I know power many of the websites on-site search boxes that they have, but not all of them. So there are a few different things that could go on here. You could be using search.gov with a CNAME. You could be using search.gov without a CNAME, meaning that your search pages are on search.usa.gov. Or you could be using a different site search provider. The Google Search Appliance, I think, has been almost completely phased out at this point, but it's very possible that you just use an implementation of a site search that's not search.gov. There are different ways that we will have to try to track all of these different things. But the first thing to understand is basically how this works in general. And so I'm going to show you in the interface here. Let's see. If you go to View Settings, and I'm currently in the Commerce profile, and we scroll down, you'll see that Site Search Tracking is turned on. If this is not turned on in a profile, or a view, as they now call them, they used to be called profiles, then it won't be looking for any site search information. But when you turn it on, you have to actually specify the specific query parameter that you use in order to, with your specific search configuration. For those of you that are unfamiliar with what query parameters are, it's when you see a question mark followed by some sort of word that's a signifier, and then it usually says equals. So in the case of commerce, if I go to the search and I put in something, we can take a look at this particular URL, and we see it goes to search.commerce.gov. So they actually, I believe they use search.gov, but they have a CNAME. So instead of search.usa.gov, they CNAME this to search.commerce.gov. And then we see we have a question mark, and it says query equals test. Now, you can see the word that I put in is test. And once you actually figure out how this works, you can manipulate things without having to actually put it in the search box. So if I say query equals dog, it should then show me, there you go, it showed me the page for the search results page for the term dog. So what this section in the settings does is actually tells Google Analytics, look in my URL and look for this particular query parameter. If you see that query parameter, take whatever it's set to and push it into the report for my on-site search data. So because we have here query is set in the profile, it says when it sees the word query, oh, I need to capture that word after it, in this case dog, and push it into my search data tables so that they can analyze it later. So what we end up getting then are reports in the search section, the on-site search section, which is in the behavior tab here. If we go down to site search, and then I scroll and I look at search terms, you'll see we'll get a bunch of information about the specific search terms. At least I hope, once it loads. There we go. So we can see here we've got these search terms, ZTE, test forms, all these different things. That's because in the profile settings, we've specified their query parameter. If at your agency you go to the search terms page and you don't see any terms, it probably means that we have not included in the settings your specific query parameter. And if that's the case, you can contact us and we'll make sure that we add it. But what we're seeing here is an overview of all the search terms that we're recording from those query parameters across all of commerce websites. And instead, we'd like to see only a specific one. So if I go to custom reports, I've got this report that we've created, the search.commerce.gov terms, and this is very specific to the things that are happening on search.commerce.gov. So how do we set this up? And again, we've included a custom report template for you so that you can go over it. Total unique searches, where the search with a dimension of search term and a filter for the host name matches exactly search.commerce.gov, because that is where this URL happens, where we see the query parameter that we're measuring. Now that's if there's a CNAME. One thing that's very important to note about how this works is that by default, our Google Analytics account, really any Google Analytics account, but the DAP account by default breaks a session when someone travels from one domain to another. Now, this is inclusive of subdomains. So you can see in my example here, the biggest culprit of this are search domains. Most of the time, if you have a team working on NIH.gov and you have a team, let's say, working on NLM, the National Libraries of Medicine, NLM.nih.gov, those two sites are pretty different from each other in terms of content and the personnel that work on them. So in most cases, you'd want a session to break across those two sites from nlm.nih.gov to nih.gov because they want to know if they're referring traffic to each other. Unfortunately, what comes with that is if you use a search subdomain like search.nih.gov, you are going to also have a session break across when someone's going from the site to the search results page, and then if they click on a link, back into the site. So that's important to remember in the way this works for how we have to set up our reports. And we have an option that we're going to talk about later where you can actually get rid of all the session breaks across a second level domain. So you could, for example, implement an option where anything within nih.gov, including all of the subdomains, would be a fluid session. But that's a whole different story. Okay, so here's the example that I showed you, search.gov and a CNAME. And so we have two templates here. One of them is the search terms template, and the other one is the clicked pages from search. So the clicked pages from search, I think, is here. And so you can see what are the pages that people clicked on once they do a search. So they've got, okay, they're going to this ZTE denial order and so on. They're going to the home page, various different places that people click once they perform a search. So that will help you understand where most of your search traffic is going to from your on-site search. But the next example I want to give, which is a little bit more difficult, is if you're not using a search. Oh, I'm glad that I had this here. The beware the HTTPS to HTTP data gap. If you have a search subdomain that is HTTPS or vice versa, if you have a subdomain and your main domain are different in terms of their security level from HTTP to HTTPS, you can lose data there because traveling from HTTPS to HTTP does not come with a referrer. So you lose a bunch of the data. At this point, I think most of the government is mostly all on HTTPS, so hopefully it's not as big of an issue. Okay, so what happens if you don't use a CNAME? So the example that we have here is the Department of Labor. And you can see that if I start out at dol.gov and I put in a search, and I'm going to just put in test again, because they don't CNAME to search.dol.gov, it shows up search.usa.gov. And then the way we know it's dol.gov is that there's a special query parameter that says affiliate equals dol.gov. Now, that query parameter has nothing to do with our search information. It has, in terms of Google Analytics, what it has to do with is telling search.gov, the site search provider, that this is a search that was performed from dol.gov, because now we have no identifier because it's on search.usa.gov. Here is our query parameter with my test, query equals test right there. So how does this make getting your search data more difficult? The problem is that USA.gov is a site that's owned by GSA. So search.usa.gov results are going to appear in the GSA profile, not in this case, the labor profile. I'm going to repeat that just so everyone understands it. Because Google uses the host name as the unit for where to put all of the data in the DAP account, dol.gov data flows into the labor profile. USA.gov data flows into the GSA profile because it's a GSA site. So if you happen to be an agency that uses search.gov and does not use a CNAME, you have to go into the GSA profile in order to find data for that particular for that information. So how can we do that? You'll see here, I'm in the GSA agency profile. I'm going to show you how I set this up. Again, this is why custom reports are so valuable, especially in DAP. So I'm in the GSA profile. Again, I'm looking for total unique searches, and I'm looking at search terms. And I'm going to have two filters here. The first filter is that the host name matches search.usa.gov, which is what we see here. And the second filter, I'm going to be using regular expressions. Remember, I told you the best trick about regular expressions is that you don't need any special characters. What is something common in this particular URL that would identify that it's DOL specific searches, and that's this affiliate. So I'm looking in the URL to say, where can I find both search.usa.gov and a URL that says affiliate equals www.dol.gov. That's the second filter that I've set up here. And you can see I just copied it directly in. Oh, interesting. In this case, this one that I showed you here, it's actually affiliate equals www.dol.gov. What I have had set up in the past was affiliate equals US Department of Labor. So there must be another Department of Labor website that actually uses affiliate equals US Department of Labor rather than www.dol.gov. Let me try to put that information in here and see if it changes it. Hope this works. We might need to switch it back. Okay, it worked. So now we're theoretically filtering in the GSA profile, but looking at DOL search terms. And you can see we've got FMLA, COBRA, and so on and so on. So that's how you would get the data if you use search.gov without a CNAME. Now, there's a third way that sometimes sites do a search. And that way is, let's say, I'm just going to just demonstrate this. Sometimes instead of having a query parameter, query equals something, they have slash search slash and then the term, whatever the term is. This is not how Google is designed to track searches. So if you have this, it actually creates a separate page, an actual page that's different for each individual term that's put in. If you find yourself in that category, you have to actually create a custom report where you would use a regular expression that looks for dol.gov/search and then get all the listings of the pages. And that way, that's the only way you could see which terms are the most commonly used. But that's not how Google Analytics is designed to track it. That it's designed to track it the other way with the query parameters. And I can have, after that question mark with the query parameters, I can put anything in here, and it'll still bring me to dol.gov. So it's not a specific page. It's just an identifier within the URL. OK. Cool. We got here a little bit early. I'm glad I was able to get through that. Do we have any questions? People did say their things. Some of the folks are checking out if well, I guess they made the guesses as to whether or not their top search terms were the things that they've listed. I'm interested to know if people found out that those were the actual terms after using the templates that we've created, or if you can be able to put it together right now. I would be impressed if anybody can put together a custom report right now, especially if they don't use a CNAME, to be able to check in the GSA profile. Again, if you have a search, an on-site search domain that follows suit with your regular domain. So if it's, in the case of, let's say, Treasury, if you have a search domain that matches a Treasury-owned second-level domain, like irs.gov or treasury.gov or whatever that may be, the data will be in your agency profile. Only under the circumstance that you use search.gov without a CNAME, and so your searches appear under search.usa.gov, would you find the data in the GSA profile. And search.gov happens to use that format of query. Their term is query, but I've also seen Q, I've seen K, I've seen include. So there's various different potential avenues that your search configuration might use. Let's just take one more look here and see if there are any other questions. It doesn't look like it, so that's good. All right, in that case, we're a little ahead of schedule, which is great. I think we can take a 10-minute break, and it's about 2:15 right now. So we'll come back at 2:25 and kick this session back up and head into the second half. Thanks all for hanging out with us so far, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, folks, welcome back. Oh, we even missed this wonderful GIF telling you to inhale and exhale before the break. I know that that's been quite a bit of information that we're trying to get through. It seems like when I'm speaking, we're trying to get through it in a relatively short period of time, even though I know a 3-hour webinar is long. But rest assured, you will get all these slides afterward. You'll get all the template links. And additionally, we're always available to help out. Our contact information will be in the slides, but it's dap@support.digitalgov.gov. Okay. Moving on, we're going to go ahead and get started with part 2 or section 2 of our training today, where we get to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is campaign URLs. So if you've taken the DAP 101 before, we have talked about campaign URLs, but I always think that it's worth repeating, talking about why they are valuable and how you can use them. So first of all, what is a campaign URL? Well, a campaign URL is basically a URL that you put in a link in some form of your outreach that has specific query parameters. So remember we talked in the last section about the search configuration, where in that particular example we saw the query parameter was query equals. And that was the thing that told Google Analytics when you put in query, that's what we set it to say, okay, record that as search data. Well, Google has some pre-configured query parameter collection for query parameters that match certain Google Analytics strings. And so those strings are UTM underscore medium, UTM underscore source, and UTM underscore name, as well as a couple others. But what those do are basically, when a URL appears, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a minute, but when a URL appears in the bar after the page loads, if Google Analytics sees any of those specific query parameters, the ones that start with UTM, it knows to take those and put them in your campaigns report. And it actually also overwrites the data for source and medium if you've set it to something. So again, this will, if you're not following now, this will make more sense in a minute. But let's talk about why we need to use them. So firstly, a ton of your data, if you don't use campaign URLs, is lost and looks like it's direct traffic accidentally if you're not using them. So one of the big culprits are if you send an email with a link in it and that link does not have a special campaign URL parameter tag on it, the email, when someone clicks on that link, will not look like traffic coming from an email. It will actually report as direct traffic. Because coming from an email, there's no referrer when you land on the site. So I use this analogy all the time, that as you travel through the internet, you have a backpack on. And in that backpack is a bunch of information about the device that you're on, if it's a laptop or a desktop, or if it's a desktop or a mobile phone, or information about where you are in terms of your geography, what network you're on, what operating system you're using, all these different things. And Google Analytics gets all that data so that we can optimize experiences. Well, one of the things in your backpack is when you arrive at a site, you have this thing called the referrer in your backpack that says where you came from. If you click on a link in an email, when you show up to that site, wherever that link took you, you don't have the referrer in your backpack. And so when the Google Analytics script runs and it opens up your backpack, it looks in and it says, oh, there's no referrer there. I guess that person came directly. Directly meaning theoretically either bookmarked or typing it in the URL bar. But that's not the case because you came from an email. So what you do is you set a campaign URL that specifies that the medium of the traffic came from an email. And then you can also set a specific source. Like maybe you can say it was not only was it from an email, it was our newsletter or something like that. And that data will be recorded in the campaigns report. So that's the first big one, untagged emails. The second really big one, and the one that really gets me on a soapbox, are shortened links. So if you use a link shortening service like Bitly or Owly or something like that, they strip out the referrer. So if you have a link to your site to, before we were using justice.gov. So if you have a link to justice.gov and you put it through a link shortener and post it on Twitter, when someone clicks on that link, they show up without the referrer because the link shortener basically rips it out of the backpack. The link shorteners are like referrer thieves. And so you land on justice.gov and it gets reported as direct traffic, which is a bummer. And I know a lot of people use shortened links for not only just Twitter, but when you have a service like Hootsuite or TweetDeck or something like that, you're using shortened links across all of your outreach. You put in the same shortened link in Facebook and all these different things, and all that traffic will look like it's direct, unless you use a campaign URL first and then shorten it. Because when it expands again into the full URL, you'll have those query parameters that'll get recorded. And the last thing I talked about very briefly before are HTTPS to HTTP links. So if there's a site that is HTTPS and it has an HTTP link on it, it does not transmit the referrer in the backpack. So in some cases, it's not something you can even do to put a campaign URL in some other site that's referring to yours. But you might be able to reach out via a contact form or something and ask somebody to put a campaign URL in the link instead of just a normal link. Having the addition of a dimension called campaign name can be super powerful for analysis. So as an example, if you are, if you're at the CDC and there's a whole campaign, an outreach campaign that you're doing around, I don't know, around diabetes, let's say, and you have labeled all of your outreach for that specific campaign. So you're sending out emails and newsletters, you've got social media presence, you've got press releases, all these different things. You can use the same campaign name of like diabetes awareness for that entire campaign. And then you can say, based on all of our outreach efforts related to diabetes awareness, we know we attracted 10,000 new sessions in the month of May. But then you can even break it down further and look at which of your specific sources contributed the most users. So it allows you to have a good sense of how much traffic is coming based on your outreach efforts versus how much traffic is coming in on its own. I wish y'all could see me right now. I'm making crazy hand motions in front of my laptop, but anyways. So those are the benefits of campaign URLs. Now let's actually create one here. I'm going to open up the Google Campaign URL Builder. So what's interesting about this is that you've got information that you can put into these fields, and what it will do is it'll actually build the URL for you. So in the case that we wanted to build something for digital.gov, I can put in digital.gov. And my campaign URL builder. That's my starting website URL. Let's say my source, let's say this is going to be an email newsletter. So my source might be newsletter. My medium in that case would be email. And I'm going to give it a campaign name, and this campaign could be events. Now down here, it gives you the generated campaign URL, digital.gov, and then you can see our specific query parameters, UTM_source equals newsletter, UTM_medium equals email, and UTM_campaign equals events. Then if you want, you could even convert it to a short link here. And what's nice about this is it still works because if I put this in, it will expand it. Now you can see here's all my information. And when Google sees this in the URL, it says, OK, capture all this information and put it in the campaign report. So we can look at a campaign report. Do I have one here? Let's just look in the GSA profile here under acquisition campaigns. So let's take a look at what this looks like. OK, so now we've got, these are our campaign names. And we've got things like shortcuts, applicants, money and shopping, and so on. And then if I click on a specific campaign name, it will drill down into that because it's an Explore report. Okay, so in this case, there's only one source medium, email alerts. They've set this to email alerts. Let's see if I can find one real quick that has something that's maybe a little larger. Okay, here we go. So now we've got various different sources and media that have been set for this particular campaign name. So I now know that the campaign name, I forget what it was now, shortcuts. Somebody named a campaign shortcuts. It has all these different sources. These look like maybe different divisions of GSA. I only know that because I work here. But now you can see, okay, well, in terms of users and sessions, this one drew the most traffic of all of our shortcuts campaign. So this is really great because you can use it in custom reports with a filter for your specific site. You can use it in segments where Freddie's going to show you some stuff on segments later. You could build a segment that says, show me only visits that come from a campaign name that equals, diabetes awareness or something like that. And then it will only show you traffic across all of the canned reports that are coming from that particular outreach. And you can use campaign stuff in all kinds of different reports. I'm going to show you another one in a minute. But this is a little bit intensive because, as you've probably seen here, you can't screw up and accidentally say, there's the full URL again. I can't put this same URL in a Twitter, in a tweet or in Facebook because I've specified UTM source equals newsletter and UTM medium equals email. Meaning that if I were to put this in a tweet, for example, when someone opens up the link, it's going to show this URL, and these source and medium will overwrite anything that Google is recording on its own. You are basically forcing it to record newsletter as source and medium as email. And this can cause issues. So you have to make sure if you're going to do campaign URLs that you've thought this out and you've got a strategy where you've got maybe the same campaign names, but you've got to make sure you've got your medium and source configured correctly, and sometimes that can cause problems. I'm going to talk about that more in just a second. We did do a webinar on campaign URLs, and we also showed about creating your own campaign URL builder. So similar to what this is, but where you can set drop downs for your specific sources and media so that you can disseminate. It's basically, we did it using a spreadsheet where you can show your team, these are the different terms we're going to use. Because if somebody screws up and accidentally makes this campaign name capital E events, it's going to record in a completely different row. Everything here is case sensitive. So if you want to get a hold of that template to create your own campaign URL builder, you can email us and we can send you that. We also encourage that you check out that webinar. So let's talk about case sensitivity, since I just mentioned it. There's a lot of stuff here where Google has what it calls the default channel groups. That's direct, organic, social, email, the ones you see here. Most of the government doesn't have to worry about paid search, other advertising, display, things like that. We're usually mainly worried with direct, organic, social, and email and referral. So the channels report is in acquisition and all traffic channels. So here is where I can see a general overview of where my traffic is coming from. The problem is that while all of these are capitalized in the report, if you capitalize them in your campaign URLs, in some cases, they won't land in the correct one. They'll go to other. I know that sounds super counterintuitive. It took me a long time to get a grasp on this. But if in the campaign URL you put medium as email with a capital E, it will not go into email. It will go into other. And that's because of the way Google defines their channels. So they're looking for exactly matches. And we've got a little thing here to show you. Whoops. If you put as your medium capital E, it will go into the other category. If you put it as a lowercase e, it will go into the correct email category. It's a weird fluke, but the solution to this is basically use lowercase for everything. When you're using campaign URLs, use lowercase for, don't ever put anything in uppercase. If you use lowercase for everything, your traffic will all go into the correct default channel groupings. And also it'll be, you'll be able to be consistent when you're creating your own campaigns to make sure that no one is accidentally capitalizing something and creating new rows. So let me just show you how, for example, you could use this. If I go down in behavior to my landing page report, site content landing pages. So when this loads, I can actually add a secondary dimension for campaign to see if my campaign was drawing any traffic to those specific pages. It may actually be more beneficial for me to do it in a custom report. But let's see here. I'm in the DOC profile currently. They might not have campaigns that are going to show up here, but we can take a look. So I added a secondary dimension. I use the dimension campaign. Oh, see, it says it can't do that one. Okay, real quickly, let's do this. Custom report. I'm going to make this on the fly with you. New custom report. And then we're going to say campaign landing pages. Metric group is going to be sessions. Mention drill down is going to be, first we're going to see campaign name. So that's just campaign. And then secondly, we're going to see the actual page where people landed. We're in the DO. Let's just see how this works without specifying a filter. So we've got subscription center. Now, not set in this case means that there were pages that were landed on without a campaign. So if one of the campaign names is subscription center, we can click there, and it's going to show us the specific pages that people landed on based on that campaign. And again, we could always add the filter there to make it specific. So this is something, a PTO, US PTO particular campaign. So really very valuable for folks to be able to know the exact reach of their outreach. And that's the biggest benefit of campaign URLs, as well as making sure that you're not just getting inflated direct traffic. It's very often the case that direct traffic just appears much, much larger than it really is because of the reasons that I showed you in a few slides before this. And I've also definitely had folks who work in social media feel like their efforts were not actually working because the traffic all looked like it was coming from direct channels and not from social media, from the social channels. So once you start using campaign URLs, you can make sure that you are tracking that correctly. All right. We're almost right on time. So I'm going to move on and pass it off to Freddie again to talk a little bit about advanced custom segments, which is where you could actually create a custom segment for a specific campaign name.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tim. Okay, so now on to advanced custom segments. So what is a segment and what can it do? I'm sure a lot of you already are experts on this. We're just going to go over it briefly. So a segment is simply a subset of your analytics data. So it's simply a tool that you program with various pieces of logic, and it empowers you to slice and dice your data based on that logic. So it's very flexible. It's a great tool to learn. Now, the really cool thing about segments is you can set all kinds of different rules and specifications simultaneously. So for example, you could get down into the nitty-gritty as far as defining the exact mobile device type. So let's say iPhone. And you could look at specifically sessions coming from organic search. So you could create a segment that encompasses that type of business logic. Now, the really useful thing about segments is it allows you to compare. So I'm sure most of you have used standard reports and custom reports where you choose multiple segments. So you can choose an all users segment, which is by default, and you can also compare it to, let's say, a mobile segment. And then you can see the interplay between these two cuts of the data. That's really powerful. So using segments allows you to very easily filter your default reports. Now, let me show you really quickly a report with a segment. Now, on my screen, I am in the HHS agency profile. You'll notice here I have an FDA traffic specific segment. I've applied this to this specific report under the All Pages report, and you can very easily add in another segment. So let's choose all users. And this will give you a view comparing both FDA traffic and all user traffic within the HHS view in Google Analytics. Now, this may take a little bit to load. But essentially, it creates a very powerful tool that you can toggle through each report. Now, if this one doesn't load here for whatever reason, I'm just going to remove it and we're going to move on.
Freddie, it's the curse of Google not playing when we have not playing nicely when we have a webinar.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. Okay, so let me show you how easy it is to toggle between reports with segments. Now you notice here, I just moved over to the content drill down report. FDA traffic, this segment follows me wherever I go. So this is super flexible. I highly recommend everyone on this webcast learn how to use segments and use this to toggle quickly between all of your reports. It's a very powerful tool. So now I'm in site speed. And again, FDA traffic segment, it follows me where I go. So very powerful for slicing and dicing data around the exact information that you're looking for in Google Analytics. Now, one thing to note, sampling does occur when you're using segments. Now, in our 101 course, we do typically talk about the little shield up here. Right now, it says it's green, and it says it's based off of 100% of sessions. When you use segments, there is a possibility that you will receive sample data. So you would see, in theory, a yellow shield here that says this report is based on, let's say, 5% of sessions, for example. You want to be careful when you segment data that you're not working off of sample data. So I'm sure many of you know what sample data is and the kind of drawbacks of using that, but it's an incomplete data set where, based on the amount of data and the processing time that Google Analytics needs to process and present that data to you in a report, it's basically when that is too great, and then Google decides it's only going to process a certain percentage of data. So you don't want to make any type of business decisions based off of sample data. And that will typically sometimes happen when you're using this type of segment. So just be forewarned about that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between segments and filters. Now, we already talked about segments. Let me go over to a report that illustrates this really nicely. Let me go back to the All Pages report. And assuming this loads, okay, we've got the FDA traffic segment here. And we have a little search box where you can filter off of your primary dimension here. Okay, you can also click on Advanced to program various logic into your filters here as well. Now, you can use both a segment and a filter in a custom report. Now, we typically get questions about, okay, that's great. We have these two tools. Which one should we use? What is the difference between segments and filters? Well, this is a complicated topic because segments and filters are very similar. So from a high level, let me just kind of unpack this for everyone. So a segment is typically used for session or user analysis across reports. So a segment basically empowers you to categorize data at a user or session level. A filter is used in report-specific analysis, but it categorizes data at a hit level. So that's essentially the difference between these two. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about segments. So as I mentioned before, a segment is simply a tool that helps you understand and analyze a subset of data for a particular group of sessions or users. This is where you're likely going to experience sampling because it's based on the session or the user. Now with filtering, same type of kind of concept, except it categorizes data at a hit level. So because it's being categorized at a hit level, you're less likely to experience sampling. So you can use a filter in similar ways as a segment, but you're less likely to experience sampling. So typically what I like to advise folks is when possible, try to use filters first before segments. Now, there are certain situations when segments make the most sense. For example, if you're trying to apply a segment to understand mobile traffic, you would want to use a segment that says device category is mobile and or tablet, right? So there are certain situations where it is appropriate to use a segment. It really just depends on what type of data you're trying to pull, whether you have a high cardinality dimension that you're trying to segment against. There's a lot of different factors that go into this. But at a high level, just remember segments used for session or user analysis, filters categorize data at a hit level. And segments are likely to experience sampling, whereas filters are sometimes less likely to experience sampling. But everyone's experience will be a little bit different based on the amount and volume of data in each view. So let's talk about custom segments specifically. Okay. So again, they segment by session or user. Custom segments enable you to decide whether you want to include or exclude different pieces of logic. Now, there are some really cool preset goodies in preset segments in Google Analytics. So we're going to take a little quick look at that. And then we're going to go over how to use the custom section of segments. So let's go into segments here. So on my screen, you will see a search box. Now I've clicked on choose segment from list. So when you click on add segment, it's going to pop open this window and you're going to be able to see a search box here. Now this includes default system segments, but it also includes custom segments that I've either added to my account or I've created myself. Okay, so let's look at a system segment that comes out of the box and that everyone on this call has the ability to use. Let's look at mobile and tablet traffic. Now, the logic here includes device category, contains mobile or tablet, as you can see as I'm hovering over those, right? So you can very easily, if you get a question from your boss about what percentage share of traffic on our website is coming from mobile and tablet devices, you could very quickly go to an all pages report, select the mobile and tablet traffic segment, hit apply, and then you could get your answer like that. assuming Google Analytics loads. Now, that's super efficient and it's super useful for our purposes. I'm going to remove the FDA traffic segment so that you all can see what it looks like to just have the mobile and traffic segment. So what does this mean? How do I interpret this? Well, you can see the mobile and tablet traffic accounts for 38% of page views in this particular report. So you can start to see how you can use segments to your advantage to glean insights on pieces of data, right? That's super powerful. So this is the benefit of using and learning how to use segments. Okay, so let's talk about custom segments. I'm going to remove mobile and tablet traffic. Now, I encourage everyone on this call to explore what types of segments that Google gives you out of the box. You don't need to recreate the wheel. Google gives you a lot of different segments out of the box. I really encourage you to test those out, play with them, see how useful they are for your specific business questions. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the FDA segment here that we were talking about earlier. And I'm going to edit this. This is a custom segment that I created. So in this custom segment, we're going to look at how to remove internal agency FDA traffic from a report. Okay. Now, we get a lot of questions from various folks in different agencies about how do we remove our internal traffic, right? It doesn't necessarily make sense to count all the traffic that everyone at the FDA is browsing on their own site. So the purpose of this segment is to exclude that internal agency FDA traffic so that you get a true count and a true understanding of folks on the outside who are browsing your website so that you can better make decisions off of that data about your user experience or how to present certain PDFs to your users, etc. So the idea here is one of how do we define internal FDA traffic? Well, a dimension that we could potentially create in a segment is service provider. Now, we know for a fact that the service provider for the FDA, this is simply the ISP. We know for a fact that the value that the FDA uses is Park Lawn Computer Center Dimes HQ. Now, Google Analytics tracks this data. And what we are doing here in the segment is we are saying exclude sessions where the service provider contains Park Lawn Computer Center Dimes HQ. Okay, so that excludes the internal traffic. Now, we want to also include traffic for the FDA specific site. So we're able to do that as well. So we've added an additional line of logic here where we are saying include sessions where the landing page contains FDA.gov. So what you're doing here in a segment is you're defining the context and the lens through which you're trying to view your data. So when you create this segment, it's going to exclude sessions where the service provider contains this string, and you're going to include sessions where the landing page contains FDA.gov. So you're doing two things here. You're defining the experience that you will only want to see FDA traffic in the HHS profile, and you're excluding internal users located at the FDA's office. And so when you click save, that saves the logic. It automatically applies to the report. And then you have an automatically created report that uses this logic we just went over to to give you the data that you see here on the screen. So this is super powerful. Now, you can also use these segments that you create here in custom reports. So you could very easily, let's say you wanted to create a report looking at page, you could very easily go into custom reports and create a page with sessions, or a report with sessions only, and look at the FDA segment overlaid on that data. So super powerful stuff. We're including the segment here so that you can add this to your reporting suite, and that you can play around with the logic and create a segment to remove your internal traffic. And also to note, we've done a webinar on this before as well. So we have a specific webinar on segments if you'd like to dive into this in more detail. Okay, so next up are DAP optional features, and I'll be handing this off to Tim.
All right, thanks, Freddie. So now we've gotten a bit of the meat and potatoes here. We've talked about custom reports. We've talked about events, the on-site search reports, campaign URLs, and segments. Now I want to spend some time to tell you about less of the actual reporting aspect and a little bit more about the optional features that you have potential to your use with DAP. So there's basically a way that we have worked out in our DAP script tag that most of you, I think, that are on the call probably have on your website, where you can turn on specific optional things or send data to specific dimensions by doing it in our script tag. So here's a question. Do you have embedded YouTube videos on your site? And if you answered yes to that question, do you know if you're tracking them using DAP's YouTube tracker event? It's very possible that some of you have YouTube videos embedded on your site, but you are not using the DAP option to track them. So we'll show you in this section how to actually do that, as well as some of the other different options that you have. So basically, the way that all of the optional features of DAP are turned on are by adding, and again, here comes that word again, the query parameters. You add in parameters in the source URL in the script tag. So for example, if I look here and I go to the page source for digitalgov.gov, let's see. Okay. So here is this highlighted portion is the DAP script tag. And you can see it says they've got it commented out, but it says the digital analytics program. And then you've got this little thing that says script language equals ID equals. And then you have, this is the important part right here, the source of the library, that the JavaScript that it calls. So this is calling the code from our central repository, which we manage, which is dap.digitalgov.gov/universal federated analytics min. But then you see there's the question mark, and then we've got these two things. VER equals true and agency equals GSA. So all of you, if you're looking at this, should at least have agency equals with your agency put in. What that does is it sends data to a specific dimension in Google Analytics that we have set that's called agency, and it says, okay, this is a GSA website. Now, just for the record, a lot of people think that when they set this agency equals, it's what actually puts the site into the specific agency profile. Unfortunately, that is not the case. While you can use the agency dimension in your reporting, setting this agency dimension in your script tag to implement DAP does not actually automatically make the data for that site go into that particular profile. Although I wish we could do that. We probably could. Technically, I think it may be possible. But we actually need to make sure that we whitelist your domain in the profile for your agency. So if you implement a new agency, or I'm sorry, a new domain if you just got it fresh off of the .gov registrar and we don't know it exists, give us a ping so that we can make sure that we put it in the filter so that it goes to your correct agency. But anyways, this is how we turn these options on. So we've got a whole document, our code capabilities summary. Whoops, I'll have to change that link. Let me show you where it lives now. In our GitHub, the Digital Analytics Program GitHub, we have a section for documentation, and there is a code capabilities summary here. This gives you information about all the different options that you can turn on by adding specific parameters into that source of the script tag. I'm not going to talk about them all today, but I am going to tell you about a few. But you can refer to this document, and I'll make sure I change that link so that you all have the correct one in the slides. But you can refer to this document to see what everything does and what you can do. Let's talk about a few of the important ones that I see folks using a lot. So here is where we do YouTube tracking. So the parameter for that is YT, and it's in our code, it's automatically set to false. So if you want to track YouTube videos, you say YT equals true, and here's an example. We've got, DAP.digitalgov.gov, and then agency equals HHS, and use an ampersand between them, YT equals true. Now, some of you, I'm sure on the call, are thinking, well, this is something that I'm going to have to contact my developer to help out with. That may be the case. If you don't have direct access to actually edit the HTML on your site, you might have to get your development team involved to add any of these particular parameters. But the example I had was in the Department of Commerce profile. So if I go into the events section under behavior and look under top events, we should hopefully have an event. There it is right there, an event category called YouTube video. So this is not something that's tracked on its own if you just implement DAP out of the box. But as soon as you add YT equals true to your pages in that particular script tag, it will start recording information about your YouTube videos. Now, what's cool about this is that you've got event action, where it tells you if a video was played, paused, finished, and if it got to a third through, 2/3 through, or 90%. So it's really interesting to sort of get a better idea for this. Now, the way it's set up in the top events report isn't super friendly for looking at a specific video. The event label is the actual video that someone played. But what you can do is set it up in a custom report a little differently. And I think I can do that right now. So we'll make a new custom report, and we're going to say this is YouTube events by video. Metric group is going to be total events. And then the dimension drill downs, in this case, we're going to say event label first, because the event label is the actual URL of the video. And then we can say page, because we want to know which page it happened on. Actually, we won't do that yet. We'll do event action. That'll tell us of that video if it was played or paused or how far they got. And then we'll finish out with page, which will show us the page that it was viewed from. Now, I have to get tricky with my filters here to make this work because I want to specify that it's a YouTube video. So here I can say event category exactly matches YouTube video. So now if we take a look at this report, I'm looking for total events, starting with event label, which is the YouTube video itself. Then show me how far people got in it, and then which page was it actually embedded on. And I have to say event category exactly matches YouTube video to make sure I'm not getting reports on other events. And if you wanted to, you could add a very specific host name as well into the filter. Because I don't know which host name has the YouTube videos, I'm just going to leave that blank. But here we've got, okay, so one of the most visited watched videos is something here, it looks like from climate.gov. We've got census.gov. If I click on it, it shows me for that particular video, and it looks like maybe it was only implemented in a few weeks ago, 4,200 people started playing it, a bunch of people paused. Of the 4,200 that started playing it, 1,500 finished, and it shows you where if they didn't finish, where you lost the folks. So 452 made it to 90% but didn't finish the video. 33% or 786 made it to 33%, between 33 and 66 when they left, and so on. So this is a pretty cool report. And then if I go through, it should then show me, and if I drill down one more time onto play, hopefully it will show me the page. There's the page where that video actually lives. It's on a specific page called How To Videos. So that's how you can set up a report for that particular YouTube event and make sure that you're tracking it correctly. Okay, other things. Demographics. So by default, demographics are not turned on. This is where you get information about age and gender. There are certain agencies that do use this. One of them is NASA. So we can just show you quickly what that looks like, if it loads for me. So this is in the audience section under demographics. I can look at age and gender, and you can see here that for NASA, oops, I was in the overview before. For NASA, it gives you this breakdown. It's only accounting for 22% of total visitors here and 25% here, so that's something to definitely try to keep in mind. This is directional data, it's not absolute data. A lot of people ask, how does Google know your demographics? And it's a little complex, but basically, like if you're not using an ad blocker, they can make assumptions about your age and gender based on your viewing history. So this data is all anonymized within Google Analytics. There's no specific information about any individual person here, but you can get overall views of age and gender, which may be something that's applicable if you're an agency that targets a specific age or gender. But you would turn that one on by adding DC link equals true into that specific source. Then we have two that we created about a year ago. We created a separate custom dimension for both site topic and site platform. And the initial thought with these was that if you had a bunch of web pages about a specific topic that you wanted to group together, so sort of trying to do what is done sometimes in Google Analytics called content grouping, you could content group based on a specific site topic. Now, you could obviously manually code this into pages where you wanted to change the site topic, but you could also, with the help of a developer who has a little bit of handy JavaScript knowledge, use a variable and pass in a variable that is set in some sort of way out of your CMS, for example. So you might have a site or maybe multiple sites where you're talking about different topics, and if you wanted to be able to get data on the topic rather than the specific pages, you could set site topics for them and then use that in your reporting. Site platform was intended to be able to, so that you could basically list if your platform was like Drupal or WordPress, or Sites USA is now sunset, but Federalist is a platform that's offered out of our office as well. Maybe you use that, but this would be able allow you to see if there were differences maybe across your agency from Drupal sites versus others. Now, I do want to make the statement here that theoretically you could pass whatever words you wanted into here, and it would record in the session with your specific pages. So sometimes people talk about wanting to use a custom dimension to be able to track something different than one of these, but in the same way that they want to track some aspect of a page into a custom dimension. So you're free to use site topic and site platform as you would best see fit for your uses. If you want to say site topic equals and you have some sort of date or something like that, that's up to you. We're not using these particular custom dimensions for any broad type of analysis because they're not used enough for us to be able to like say make general assumptions about the trends of topics that people are visiting. So I grant you the ability to pass what you may like into there, but just know that it's going to be called site topic or site platform in the dimension in the actual system, so that when you're creating a report, you know which dimension to use. Okay, now we're going to talk about subdomain override, which is what I was talking to you regarding the session breaking across different domains. So we had that example of when someone's on nih.gov and they go to search.nih.gov, that constitutes a break of the session. And sometimes some agencies don't want that. So we have the ability for you to type in sdor equals, and you put in what's called your second level domain. So your second level domain is whatever's in front of the .gov. That might be gsa.gov or whatever your particular agency site is, or even if you have a different site, that's not an agency cabinet name or something, but it's climate.gov or whatever you have. You can say sdor equals second level domain, and what that will do is no longer break a session across any of the subdomains of that site. So that would mean if we put in sdor equals nih.gov, when someone traveled from nih.gov to search.nih.gov and back into nih.gov, it would be a single session. But it would also mean that if someone traveled from nih.gov to nlm.nih.gov, that would also be a single session, which means the folks at NLM would not be able to see referral data coming from nih.gov. So I know that that's a little bit complex. The default setting is that subdomain override is off. But if you're an agency where you feel strongly that any traffic between your subdomains should be a single session, you can use that option in order to do it. I think this is the last one. Finally, we can talk about parallel tracking. So this is a dimension, or I'm sorry, a query parameter that we have defined as PUA, which is parallel. I think UA stands for urchin account. That's your individual Google Analytics ID. So you could say PUA equals UA-1234567-1. So our DAP account ends in 145. So we've got 145-1 and 145-2. You probably have an independent implementation of Google Analytics on your site that's not DAP. What this option allows you to do is have the DAP code harvest all the data and then send it not only to our account, but also to the account you specify here. So here's the data harvest right here, and you can see it sends to the DAP government-wide account that we manage. And then you could also have that data sent to your separate independent Google Analytics account that you manage. There are some benefits to that. Number one is we've already hard-coded all those custom events for downloads and outbound link clicks and all those things. All of the default events that happen in the DAP data will get pushed to your PUA Google Analytics account. What will not happen is you won't have all of the filters that we've already set in the settings section. Now, I'm not talking about report filters here. I'm talking about filters in the settings. It won't have those. And it will still be subject to the Google Analytics free quote unquote hit cliff, where if you have more than 10 million hits per month, it will stop recording. But if you don't have the ability to have a developer help you code custom events and you want to use the custom events that are provided with that, you can just use a PUA account to have the data sent to both accounts. Now, something very, very important about this. If you choose to use a parallel account with DAP and send data to a different account, do not leave on the script tag for the default script tag for that Google Analytics account. They used to start with isogram, and I think now they've switched to, if you get a new one, it's a gtag.js account. Don't have both the separate Google Analytics independent code in your HTML and the DAP account sending data to that account. It will double hit everything. Everything will be double counted. So you need to make sure that if you're going to use this option, you coordinate it. You can contact us and we can guide you through that. So obviously here with the DAP account, You've got no hit limit. You have access to unsampled reports. You get the funnel report, which is only available in the paid version, and you have access to gov-wide information or agency-wide information in your profiles. If you use a PUA account, you're sending data about your specific site to a separate account that you've created. You have the ability to integrate Search Console, which is a pretty big, actually, pretty cool thing. You can set all your own goals. Goals and conversions are something that are valuable, but you get some of the advantages of DAP, particularly that the preset events. And we're going to talk a little bit about Search Console later on, but that's something that you're definitely going to want to have, whether it be in a separate, completely separate, independent implementation of Google Analytics, or if it's in a parallel implementation using the DAP code. 321, and I'm supposed to be at 320. All right, moving on. We're finally getting to the last few minutes here. Well, the last half hour is spending a few minutes on a few different tools that you can use to integrate or help implement Google Analytics that we think are really useful. So, Freddie, you can go ahead and take it away with GTM.
All right, thanks, Tim. Okay, so Google Tag Manager, this is definitely a more advanced part of today's presentation. Some of you may know what this is. Many of you probably don't. That's okay. We're going to give a brief overview and speak to GTM, as we call it, and kind of guide you through the highlights. So a tag manager, Google Tag Manager, what is that? Well, Google Tag Manager is simply a tag management system in which multiple tags, so they could be from Google Analytics, they could be a remarketing tag, they could be for AdWords, they could be from Facebook. All of these tags live in this Google Tag Manager container, and it's installed into your website through one tag snippet. Now, on the screen right now at the very top is what that snippet looks like. So this tag management system contains many different tags, and it works with your page URL, the elements, and the markup on a page to capture a more complex and rich data set. Now, there are a number of benefits to using Google Tag Manager with Google Analytics. It helps you streamline the amount of code on your pages. So within Google Tag Manager, let's say you have a Facebook pixel, you have Google Analytics, you have a couple different tags. You can include all of these tags within Google Tag Manager and just have the Google Tag Manager snippet fire, and then that fires everything else. So conceptually, at a very high level, you're basically managing all of this JavaScript without needing a developer. So you're able to fire different tags based on different actions that your users take. And you can encode all of this and customize it within the Google Tag Manager interface. Now, the interface empowers you to give permissions to other users to also work on different interactions, how to track those, how to create events. And it also lets you preview different interactions and events and different types of tracking and tags that you implement through the Google Tag Manager interface. One thing to note, we have done a webinar on tag managers before. So when you get this deck, if you're interested in exploring Google Tag Manager, we recommend that you review that webinar for more details. So couple high-level basics within Google Tag Manager. So some common terminology that you will run into when you start getting up to speed on Google Tag Manager. So a container in Google Tag Manager is simply a code snippet that enables your tag configuration. So you can fire a tag to capture a specific interaction with a specific piece of your website. Now, a tag is simply the piece of JavaScript that tells Google Tag Manager what you want it to track. So this will typically be a Google Analytics tag or a Facebook tag or an AdWords tag, etc. A trigger simply tells GTM when you want a tag to fire. And then finally, a variable stores data from your triggers, or it can pass data. Now, there's a lot going on here. So I want to go over a quick example of what this could potentially look like. Now, on my screen, you'll see analytics.usa.gov. Now, the page is already loaded. DAP's JavaScript snippet has already fired. Now, you'll remember from the section that I went over today on events, that events are interactions with content. Now, what we've done here is we're looking at this analytics.usa.gov homepage. And now let's say we want to understand when users click on 7 days. So when I click this 7-day link here, this toggles the data from DAP that powers analytics.usa.gov and gives you a 7-day slice of the data. So we can see here that tools.usps.com is the top visited page. Now, let's say for whatever reason, I'm working with my UX developer. I want to understand how many people are clicking on this 7 days link. Well, you can do that with Google Tag Manager. Now, on my next screen here, I am in the source code of the page that I just showed you on analytics.usa.gov. Now, I'm going to look in the elements and in the markup for anything that I can potentially find using Google Tag Manager. So I clicked on 7 days, and now I'm looking in the actual HTML for anything that I can potentially listen for when somebody clicks on something. Now here you'll see there's a bulleted list. And you'll see here, there's a link to hashtag top pages 7 days. So this is the link that I clicked on to toggle 7 days. Okay. Now let's go into Google Tag Manager to see how we set up an event to capture this link click. Okay, so I am in Google Tag Manager for analytics.usa.gov. Now you can see here we've got a default workspace. We have a number of tags, triggers, variables, etc. I'm going to go to the tag for event, 7-day toggle. So this is how we're tracking all users that click on 7 days here, and this toggles the data. Okay, so let me walk through this really briefly for you. So here's how the tag is configured. So we've set it up as an event. We have our category, our action, and our label, if you recall the previous section that we just went over on events. We have a variable here for Google Analytics settings for the DAP UAID. And then we have a trigger. Let's look at the trigger. So we're looking at the trigger configuration here, and we're defining it as a click for just links. So we're saying track when somebody clicks a URL that contains the hashtag top pages 7 days link click. So what this enables us to do is without a developer, we are able to go in and create tags and triggers to capture clicks when anyone clicks on the 7-day link here on analytics.usa.gov. So that's a really cool, really powerful feature. And we're using the HTML and any type of elements and markup within the DOM so that we can actually listen and capture these different types of interactions without having to go and asking our developer to specifically encode something like a custom event when users click on 7 days. So it's super powerful. Okay, so that was Google Tag Manager. The next session section is Google Data Studio. So let's talk a little bit about Google Data Studio. We're going to do a brief overview. We've had a previous webcast where we have gone into depth in Google Data Studio. We're only going to be spending about 10 minutes on Google Data Studio today. So what is Google Data Studio? I'm sure some of you have access to this already. Some of you have already played with it. That's great. For those who don't, let's briefly talk about what it is and what it does. So Google Data Studio is simply a tool made by Google, and it's used to build custom reports and dashboards. So this is more advanced than custom reports. Think about it that way. Now, there's other tools out there like Tableau, super powerful. They visualize data, super complicated. But Google Data Studio empowers you to mine your data on the fly while also creating interactive visualizations directly from Google Analytics data. So this is really key and really important to be able to leverage this tool in your analysis using DAP data. Couple things to note. We recommend you first learn standard reports, and then second, learn custom reports. Now you need to do both of these things before you attempt to use Google Data Studio. So if you're new with us today, do not attempt custom reports before you learn the basics in standard reports. And if you have experience in DAP already, don't attempt to use Google Data Studio unless you've used custom reports before. Otherwise, it's going to be super confusing. Okay, so let's explore a quick example. On my screen is a Google Data Studio dashboard. I'm going to go into view mode here. Now, you can see here, we're hooked up to DAP data. We can toggle between any view in DAP. Right now, we're looking at the VA's data. Now, what's really cool here is that you can design this dashboard so that it automatically shows you the most important data that you think is most impactful about your site. So clearly here we have a top line overview of users, sessions, page views, bounce rate. We have a site session trending chart. We're looking at channel engagement by sessions and page views. We have demographics data. We have top countries by session. So the beauty of Google Data Studio is in how powerful it is and how quickly it empowers you to be able to sift through data and create meaningful visualizations that communicate a story about your data so that you can communicate to your stakeholders in a more effective way. So Google Data Studio should be kind of your end goal here, right? Get up to speed on standard reports and custom reports, and then look into how do you leverage and communicate using Google Data Studio to create powerful visualizations and even mine your data on an ad hoc basis. Now, one really cool thing here, let me show you how easy this tool is to use once you get the hang of standard and custom reports. I'm going to go to a second page here, just a blank page. And let's say, let's look at the report settings real quick. I'm in the Veterans Affairs view. Now, let's say I want to understand on the fly how my default channel grouping data is showing up in reporting. So we're trying to understand marketing channel, direct, etc. So these are organic search, email, paid search, etc. I'm going to quickly create a table of data and show you how easy this gets once you learn the basics. So I'm going to go to channel grouping. And then I'm going to click on show summary row. And what we see here for the VA is that they received almost 23.4 million sessions across these channels. So referral, direct, organic search, etc. So super powerful. You can't do that in a custom report. This is so much quicker, but you need to know custom reports before you can get into Google Data Studio and do this. So tread lightly. Now, let's say your boss comes to you and says, okay, how did social media perform on smartphone devices? Well, you could try to toggle through standard reports. You could create a custom report, or if you've done your due diligence and you understand how that all works, you could go into Google Data Studio and leverage the power and mine your data very quickly. So let's look at how one might do this for the VA. Now, I already have this table that I set up. It has default channel group. It has sessions. Let's try to add a segment for mobile and see what shows up. Now, you remember the mobile and tablet traffic system segment that I spoke about earlier? I'm going to select that. I'm going to apply that. And you can see automatically it applies the segment. And now we have almost 6.1 million sessions in total for mobile and tablet traffic. Now for social, 43,179 sessions on mobile and tablet devices drove this amount of traffic from the social media channel. So this is just a quick example about how quick and how easy it is to use Google Data Studio to mine your data to find quick answers. And it really illustrates the power of this tool once you get to a point where you know how to use standard and custom reports. Okay. And now I'm going to switch it back over to Tim to speak about Search Console.
Okay, last tool we're going to discuss, the last 10 minutes of instruction here before we get to the final questions. I also want to note that these tools are just options that we happen to be able to use here at GSA. I've also seen some great things done with other visualization tools straight out of spreadsheets, and we've done a webinar on that, as well as I know that a lot of folks in government use Tableau, which is also very powerful. I've also seen a few different options for tag managers. One of the other ones that is something you can look into other than GTM is called Telium. And I know that there's at least one agency who's using that on a pretty large scale. But they all offer the same types of abilities, you know, adding a container in terms of the tag management systems and providing visualization tools straight out of the Google Analytics data. So finally, let's talk a little bit about Search Console, which you may remember that I mentioned in one of the previous sections, because I was saying it's one of the big benefits that you can link to your independent Google Analytics account. And in order to understand why we need Search Console, I think the best place for us to start might be in that acquisition channel showing you the channels report. So if I go here and I show you the channels report, we get the different channels. If I click on organic search, it used to be, it was a long time ago now, probably 7 or more years ago, that you used to be able to see all of the keywords that people put into organic search engines that eventually led to someone clicking on a link that led them to your site. This was like a bread and butter report for a lot of folks. Unfortunately, whenever that was, like 7 years ago, Google made a move where Google.com moved to HTTPS if you were logged into any Google product. So that means, you know, Gmail, YouTube, whatever it may be. If you were logged into a Google product and you performed a search on Google.com, it was under HTTPS. And as soon as they made that change, what happened was the data for the specific keywords became basically useful, or not useful, useless. Because when that particular shift happened, it obfuscated the actual keywords that people were putting in to get to your site. So you can see here, 97.94% of all of the search keyword information is not provided And that's because it was done not necessarily just on Google anymore. Now even Yahoo and Bing and things like that have HTTPS search engines where you're going to get that not provided information. So Google needed to figure out a way to be able to get those reports back to people, because it was something that people were using for their SEO and to make sure that they were getting the proper rank that they thought they were getting, or that the search terms that people were using in organic search engines were actually leading to the right pages. So that's how we got Search Console. And what Search Console does is allows you to repopulate search query data from google.com. It only works for google.com, but that is that provides a lot more data than you were able to get previously. So what Search Console basically does, and here's the Search Console interface, and we need to say thank you to the folks at USA.gov for allowing us to have access to this to show you. But if I go to search traffic and I look at search analytics, it will then allow me to see information about clicks, impressions, click-through rate, and position for these various different terms that led to USA.gov. And this is really great. I mean, you get click-through rate, you get your average position, and when we say position, that's referring to your position on the search results page on google.com. How many clicks people eventually using this specific query got, and impressions is when it appears on the search results page, but it doesn't. They didn't necessarily click it. It's somebody saw it on a search results page. So this data can be really, really useful. And unfortunately, what you have to do in order to implement Search Console is go through another sort of step where you have to verify ownership of your specific site. And there's a few different ways you can do that. You can do it by embedding a little piece of code. You can do it by verifying it via Google Tag Manager, a couple different options. But after you get that initial step done, what's great is that you've got the Search Console interface here that you can play with, and you can see not only the queries, but the pages where people landed and information about devices and location. You can also then link that information with your Google Analytics account. Now, here's where we come across another downside. Because of the structure of the DAP Google Analytics account having so much data in it, we don't have the ability to link Search Console because we have so many different sites, and it wouldn't be able to verify all of those different sites. So if you want to use Search Console, you have to link it to either a completely independent Google Analytics implementation, or an implementation using the PUA, but one where you create the account, it has your own separate account number, it does not end in 145-1 or 1452. That is how you would actually take advantage of this. So what I'm showing you here actually is demo data from the Google Merchandise Store that anybody can access. Google just offers up this data set as a way that people can do instruction. But under Acquisition Search Console, once you connect that data, you can then, in your reporting interface here, see the landing pages from Google search queries, and then also see all the things that you can see in the actual Search Console interface. So here we've got people putting in YouTube merch and things like that. Now, this other is here because of the fact that this report is what we call a high cardinality report, and it should tell me that right here. See, this report includes a high cardinality dimension, and some data has been grouped into other. So a really quick description about cardinality, which is another advanced concept that I think is worth describing right now. When you have a dimension, the possible outcomes of that dimension are the cardinality. So for example, the dimension device category has a cardinality of 3. It could be desktop, mobile, or tablet. That's it. When you have a dimension like search query, it has an infinite cardinality, because however many searches people put in that are different are going to be all of the results. So if we look down here, this report is showing us almost 22,000 rows of search query data, But even so, Google basically has to make a decision at some point where they cut it off and they lump a bunch of the data into one row, which they call other. So you can see right now there's 34%, a little over a third of all of the search term data from Google is lumped into this other category. That doesn't mean that people typed in the word other. It doesn't mean that there's a single word that is 33%. This is all of what we call like the long tail, all of the words that maybe have one click on them that people used. Unfortunately, in the Google Analytics interface, there's no way to get rid of other, and there's no way to unpack it. Even if you do an unsampled report, the data will still come through with an other row because Google just has limitations on the amount of rows in a table that it can have records for. So it's unfortunate that it's there, but in reality, it's not giving you information about your most used search queries anyways. Your most used search queries are all going to be recorded here, and you can obviously expand this up to 5,000 rows. So that's Search Console. A couple things about it. Number one, you'll see it's got about a little more than a 24-hour delay before the data actually comes in. So don't use it for like today or yesterday. I would only use 2 days back in your data. But you connect it in the admin section under all products. Actually, you don't. Oh yeah, Search Console right here. So this is where you could link Search Console to your particular non-DAP Google Analytics account to be able to create that data flow. Alternatively, you can also just activate Search Console and access it only from the Search Console interface. This used to be called Google Webmaster Tools. So if you've heard of that before, that's now what's called Search Console. All right, we've got the pros and cons here. I think I mentioned all these. Pros gives you insight into queries from Google, shows your click-through rate. You can use it to help improve your SEO. It integrates directly into GA if you don't want to bother with 2 interfaces. The cons, it requires that site verification, and we have a link here about the different ways you can do that. It's not compatible with DAP, so you can't link it directly to the DAP account, and it has a couple days lag in the data. All right, it is almost 3:50. We have actually made it through all of the content. For those of you that are still with us, thank you. I was chatting with Janelle when Freddie was talking earlier, and it sounds like we didn't lose too many of you, and I applaud you for hanging on with us for nearly 3 hours. At this point, we can go ahead and try to take a few questions, and while we're taking those questions to finish up, I'm just going to put on this slide where you can see our contact address, dap@support.digitalgov.gov. Feel free to reach out about any portion of this webinar, and we're happy to try to follow up with you and get you the information that you need. So let's check out the questions as we finish it out here. Oh, also, thank you, Janelle from the DGU team who just posted. Give us your feedback about today's training. It would be super, super beneficial if everyone could fill that out for us to let us know. I know that this is a particularly long webinar. We want your feedback. We hope that we were able to keep it light and informational, but we're interested in hearing all your thoughts. Are there any other questions at this point? If there are, go ahead and put them in the chat box. Going once. Going twice. All right. Folks seem to be shy today. Well, in that case, I just want to thank you one more time and also thank the DGU team and Freddie Blicker for tag teaming this webinar with me. I hope that for all of you on the line, this was beneficial. And again, we look forward to hearing from you and helping you along your analytics journey. Have a great week, folks.